Howdy, Commanders. Echo here. No, I'm not dead. I'm back. And so are the Azure Lane gals. Another collaboration, another 5 Commanders. So without further ado, let's dive straight into it. So the first one we're going to take a look at here is Azure Lane Baltimore, the American cruiser-centric commander. For base trait Adaptive Tactics, reduces your rudder shift time by up to 6%, 0.3% per level, up to 6. Why? Why is this a base trait? Sure, it's a global base trait, which goes up to 6%, which is fairly unique. Most of them top out at like 4 or 5 if they're a global base trait, but I think the devs realized that rudder shift is not that big of a deal. So even though it's universal, it can go up to 6. Sure, whatever. As a base trait for her on the American cruisers, that's not really what they're designed to do. They have the high arcing shells on basically every ship in the entire line, all the way up and down, all the premiums. You're mostly meant to park behind an island and sit there and sit in a smoke screen, you know, that you're stealing from a destroyer or another cruiser. Or, in some cases, like Baltimore and Wichita, just park their bow in and bow tank things, depending on what exactly it is. So, reducing rudder shift is not that useful, especially on the heavies, which she's clearly meant to be on. And talking about her base trait as an inspiration, why? Sure, it's universal, but when you combine all of the other commanders across the game, and even a couple of the universal base traits that are much more useful than this, I could think of 15 or more base traits that are way more useful in basically every situation than this base trait. Using this as an inspiration has basically no value, and I would scarcely ever think of a build that's like, oh yeah, let's go with Azure Lane Baltimore Adaptive Tactics as an inspiration for this build. Just no. Looking at her unique trait, Absolute Ammunition, it reduces your cruiser's shell fuse timer and increases their armor penetration capability. So, based on that description, you would think, oh, cruisers' shells and increase their armor penetration ability. Based on that, oh, cool, it's like a little bit of punch through combined with equilibrium of power, and you get a little bit of, oh wait, no, it's not. It's only the AP shells. Hence the name of the skill, Absolute Ammunition, and then when you actually read the description, you know, the little plus and minus lines, it is applying only to the AP shells. So it's a bit unfortunate. They could have had an opportunity here to kind of combine punch through with equilibrium of power and kind of make a hybrid skill that isn't quite as good as each of those, but you know, decent for both, because then she could be good on both the heavies and the lights. But nope, it's AP only. I don't understand. I think they're still trying to like unlock the mystery of semi-armor piercing shells. They keep introducing these skills that mess with like penetration and shell fuse timer, and I think they're just trying to figure out how to get SAP to work in a way that isn't just like code a third type of shell. I don't know. So I think this is their way to kind of get some data on that. I don't really know why you would choose this over punch through. The American heavy cruisers can Citadel battleships pretty readily and don't often overpen other cruisers unless they're extremely thinly armored. You know, stuff like Atlanta, for example. Yeah, Baltimore can overpen that and fail to get it to stick in the Citadel, but for the most part, you're shooting at more bow-in cruisers, more heavily armored cruisers, and battleships with your AP. So I'm not exactly sure what you're going to get out of this skill over punch through. It's in the same slot. It's in that slot 3, which means it has to go up to 14 legendary 3 to be maxed out, which is a pretty hefty ask, especially on the Azure Lane commanders. And for just kind of a wonky sort of turn your AP shells into kind of semi-armor piercing, I'm not really sure if that's worth it. As to Baltimore, on the Baltimore, I mean, it's just a worse Scott. Like, if you're in a position where you're like, oh, I like Scott, but I think his base trait is just too good. You know, one of the best base traits in the game combined with an offensive suite of skills. I don't really like that on the Baltimore, or any American cruiser for that matter. Kind of talk about both at the same time. If you're in a position where it's like, yeah, built-in precision on my main battery, I just don't really like that. I think, you know, this rudder shift base trait is way better than main battery precision built in. Then I guess you could run Azure Lane Baltimore. Your Scott is already probably a pretty high level. Investing a bunch of POs, Blue XP insignias, and commendations into a worse copy of Scott, I just don't think it would be worth it to gain access to this skill. Like, that would be the reason you would do it. I don't see why you would want to run this over punch through per se, especially considering it's in the same slot. Now, if this was in like slot 2 and you were choosing it over Igniter and it was easier to max out, you know, 12 Legend 2 instead of 14 Legend 3, then it would be a no-brainer, and this would honestly be a choice, because then you could really get your AP shells frickin' humming. But when you have to pick this instead of punch through, I don't really see what you're getting better out of punch through. And when you have to sacrifice Scott base trait to get frickin' rudder shift on American cruisers, I just don't really see her being terribly viable on any ship in the American cruisers. Any of the lines, the light cruiser split, any of the premiums, I just don't really see her being more worthwhile than running Scott. And lastly, to cross ship potential, I guess technically, you know, since her base trait is kind of a global, any class type of base trait, and then this left branch of the skill tree here in the slots 1 through 4 technically also applies to any ship. You can put her on DDs and battleships. Fully packed, you know, the Kid has a heal. All the DDs have smoke screens and speed boosts. So I guess in that regard, putting her on a DD isn't a waste. No slot is wasted, basically. You know, you get something out of her base trait, and you get something out of this whole left tree. You could get something out of fully packed. Same with battleships. Again, you know, all of this stuff technically helps on a battleship, but there's like bring a battleship or DD commander up to rank 4, or even Dewey for that matter, and you're gonna get more out of it. So there isn't much cross potential. Technically it doesn't hurt you in any slot, but it's a giant waste, and you should really just run somebody who's better built for those other two classes. Final thoughts on Azure Lane Baltimore. I'm sure you figured it out already, but I don't really think she's worth it. I definitely will not be dropping 5,000 gold on her to buy her specifically out of the store. And if I bought like a single crate and I got her, I would be kind of disappointed. If I bought one of the bigger packs of crates that came with more than 5 commanders and I got her as a duplicate, again, I'd be a little disappointed. So I wouldn't go out of my way to try to get Baltimore, and I definitely, if I did get her, wouldn't be putting any promotion orders, Blue XP, etc. into her to level her up, because I don't really think she's useful in any way. Alright, next we're going to talk about Queen Crazy Eyes herself, Azure Lane, Queen Elizabeth. First off, her base trait, Queen's Orders. Affects Battleship Reload, Battleship AP Shell Damage, and Battleship Precision. At 0.1% per rank, topping out at 2%. Now, yes, this isn't a huge amount in any one of those things, but it's affecting 3 things. 3 very key things for battleships. Who doesn't want reload, AP shell damage, and precision on their battleship? I don't know. Everybody should want those things. And again, 2% isn't a huge amount when she's maxed out. So realistically, you're not even going to ever really reach that 2%. You're going to be in the high 1% range. 1.7, 1.6, 1.8, somewhere in there maybe. But still, a little bit of effect on all 3 of those statistics is awesome. And when we get into more of her build a little bit later, you're going to see how affecting those 3 things on her base trait is even more impactful than it may look at first glance. So her base trait for her, for the British battleships, is awesome. They need a little help on all 3 of those things, so her base trait on the British battleships is great. In terms of using her base trait as an inspiration, again, She's great to use across basically any battleship commander in your Navy. Do your battleships want reload, AP shell damage, and precision? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, then she's a decent option. Again, not a huge impact in any one of those areas, but a little bit of impact in multiple areas may be better in a lot of cases than a bigger impact in just one area. To better illustrate this, let's talk about the 3 battleship commanders in the game who affect these 3 things specifically. Reload time of battleship main guns, that's de Revel. He tops out his base trait at 6%. So for a similarly leveled Queen Elizabeth versus de Revel, basically getting 1/3 of a de Revel impact. Okay, cool. Oh, I'm also getting 2 other things? Great. Battleship main gun AP shell damage, that's Celiax. He tops out at 5%. So for a similarly leveled Queen Elizabeth Azure Lane versus Celiax, you're getting 40% of a Celiax. Awesome. Oh, I also got 33% of a de Revel, and I'm getting 40% of a Celiax. Sounds pretty great to me. Oh, and precision. Precision of battleship main guns. That's Cunningham. He also tops out at just 5%. So again, for a similarly leveled AL Queen Elizabeth, you're getting 40% of a Cunningham. So 40% of a Cunningham, 40% of a Celiax, 33% of a de Revel. Well, I'm no math surgeon, but that's 113% in my book. So for the same number of promotion orders, Blue XP, Signia, and commendations into any one of those guys, you get 113% of all of them put together. Sounds like a pretty good deal to me. And again, yes, the singular impact on any one of these stats is not as great as any of those guys. But when you're getting 113% of all of them put together for investing in only 1 commander versus 3, you don't have to burn inspiration slots. You can still slot in those guys if you want to double up the impact on those traits, or you can slot in someone else to kind of diversify your benefits across the board and really kind of maximize a little bit of everything across all the stats. Her base trait is probably one of the best in the game, specifically for battleships. Alright, now let's talk about her unique trait, Skywatch. This is in slot 2. It increases the spotter plane's duration and the number of charges. I don't have data on how high this goes, but even a 10% increase and a +1 charge count at rank 1 or mastery 1 is pretty decent to begin with, and it's obviously only going to go up from there. Keep in mind, as I mentioned, this isn't slot 2, so it maxes out mastery 4 of 4 at only rank 12 legendary 2. That's not that high of an ask, to be completely honest. You don't even start getting into insignias at that point. You're only working on POs, Blue XP, and commendations. So maxing this out and getting its supreme benefit is not that difficult to do. And when you consider that she's a brawler build, so the only other thing you're competing against in slot 2 is crisscross, because really Porcupine on any ship, British battleships in particular, giant waste of a skill slot. So you're really only competing against crisscross. Well, yes, the British battleships do struggle a little bit with turret traverse, but we've got a pretty decent base trait covering a lot of bases. We can use one of our inspiration slots for Kedrov. You've got a high level Kedrov because you run Kedrov on the Soviet battleships, so putting him in makes up for dropping crisscross, and then you can take Skywatch. People neglect spotter planes at their own peril. Let's say you've got Skywatch, Brawler, Queen's Orders, and a de Revel build with Kedrov on there too for the crisscross. Your reload is most likely, with a high enough de Revel, gonna get you 3 salvos. I don't know how high this goes, what the percentage increase goes up to, but assuming this is maxed out, I can pretty much guarantee that you're gonna get 3 salvos off. Again, stacking Brawler, her base trait, and a de Revel inspiration. Heck, you could even go mad in inspiration to really get the reload as fast as possible. And depending on what tier of ship you're in, there's modules that you can take to even further decrease your reload. So you could be looking at easily getting 3 salvos off per spotter plane. Oh, you're also getting more spotter planes. Oh, you're also getting a little bit of precision out of her base trait. You're basically turning a brawler build into sometimes a sniper build, into a sometimes precision build, decently, frequently, 3 salvos back to back to back, multiple times per game. That's one of the things that brawler builds struggle with in the game, is actually getting shells to hit. But when you can 3 salvos back to back to back multiple times per game, basically turn yourself into a precision build, that's pretty decent in my book. You can also stack this with a Cunningham inspiration instead. Go like Cunningham D. Ravel to have pretty decent precision most of the time, and then really crank it up. Again, multiple times per game, back-to-back salvos, and just punish people when they turn broadside and flash too much of that Citadel at you. We've already kind of talked about the fact that she's a brawler build. You can combine brawler, firefighter, master mechanic. So you're probably, if you are going to be running her as a commander, you're probably going to want to get her to level 16 or rank 16 to get you the +2 repair party charges. She also has access to Will to Rebuild, so she's pretty much better than Azure Lane Nelson, with the possible exception of on the Nelson, since the Nelson doesn't have a spotter plane. Azure Lane Nelson is basically irrelevant for the rest of the British battleships now, because Queen Elizabeth here is just strictly better. You get Skywatch, you get this base trait that's just awesome. You get a brawler build with, you know, the survivability. That was one of the main reasons to take Azure Lane Nelson, was because she had access to Master Mechanic. But now you also get Will to Rebuild. So you get that improved heal, you get more of them, and even more improvement on a Master Mechanic, and you've got that passive proxy effect for when you're close to a teammate and you're low health. So she's got a great set of skills here for the British battleships. She pretty much makes Azure Lane Nelson irrelevant on any ship except for maybe the Nelson itself still. As to AL Queen Elizabeth on the Queen, I don't really see any problem with that. She'd be very strong there, as well as the rest of the tech tree ships. She'd be decent on Hood. She'd be decent on Nelson. I still think AL Nelson is probably stronger on the Nelson. But, you know, if you are going to put QE on the Nelson, you just make sure you take off Skywatch and put Crisscross on. And then you're doing pretty well on the Nelson boat as well with Queen Elizabeth here. So, you know, Warspite, she'd do well on that. There's basically no ship that she would perform poorly on. And she'd be a very strong pick, I think, for pretty much all of the British battleships. As to cross-class potential, Azure Lane Queen Elizabeth doesn't really have a whole lot. Obviously, her base trait would be completely wasted because it applies only to battleships. I guess Not One for the Nuisance is decent. Technically, Crisscross can apply to cruisers and destroyers. Porcupine technically isn't wasted on cruisers, or even the Cossack, which technically has a secondary gun. This would actually be wasted on the British tech tree cruisers because they only have one shell type. But Firefighter can apply to all ship classes, so reaching out a little bit of range, but it's so minimal it doesn't really matter. Now, Master Mechanic, since the British cruisers all have heals, might be a little more worthwhile. And again, Will to Rebuild there affecting your heal and giving you that proxy, you know, since you're in your smoke and others try to come into it sometimes, you might get a little more out of Will to Rebuild on the British cruisers than you would like other nations' cruisers. But again, much like with Azure Lane Baltimore for the American cruisers, why you'd be running Azure Lane Queen Elizabeth on a destroyer or a cruiser for the Brits, it's basically a waste. Again, technically in every slot you can find something that helps you except for her base trait, right? You would be 100% wasting a base trait. But on the tree over here, you can technically find something in every slot that at least gives you some benefit. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about her for cross-class. So lastly, final thoughts on Azure Lane Queen Elizabeth. I think she's a very solid battleship commander, both for the Brits, tech trees, premiums, etc., and as use as an inspiration. I think her unique trait is pretty solid, given where it's at, what it's competing against, and what it does. So I think that she would probably be worth dropping 5,000 gold on. Again, make your own decision. Are you a battleship main? Whatever. But I think she's a pretty solid choice out of this 5 Azure Lane lineup. She's one of the stronger ones in my opinion. And if you were to buy the crates and you get her, or if you duplicate her, I wouldn't be too upset about that. She is a very solid Azure Lane commander. Alright, next we're going to talk about Azure Lane Admiral Graf Spee. Her base trait, Pocket Battleship. It's a pretty cool graphic for it. It increases the amount of hit points restored by the repair party consumable. It goes up by 0.3% per rank and tops out at 6%. It does apply to any class of ship. At least some ships of every single class in the game have heals, so you could use it potentially as an inspiration across the board. So in that way, it is pretty nice that it does apply to any class. What I'd like to bring up about this base trait is that it is just strictly better than Takagi's. Yes, the wording is slightly different. I don't know if this is a translation issue or what's going on, but I have bounced back and forth between this and Takagi's, and in a functional, actually applying to the game type of way, I do not understand how her base trait is any different from Takagi's in terms of what they do or how they perform. Again, this could be a translation issue, but in reading them, yes, Takagi's description says increases the maximum amount of hit points restored, but when you actually read the line that has the percentage, it doesn't appear to make any difference between his and Admiral Graf Spee here, except for the fact that hers is just strictly 1% better at maximum level. Hers tops out at 6, his tops out at 5. Yay, pay to win power creep, gotta love it. Again, this could be a translation issue. I'd like to think I have a pretty decent understanding of the game's mechanics. I always thought that his, increased the maximum. So for example, let's say a Citadel, you can only repair 10% of a Citadel's damage that is done back to you. But let's say you have a maxed out Takagi on there at 5%, well now you can heal 15%. But then when you read the actual line of it, let's just go to it here. It says total hit points restored by repair party. How is that in a functional, practical way? Yes, I know it's using different words, but in a game mechanics type of way, how is that different from the wording we were just looking at on Admiral Graf Spee? Again, could be a translation thing. I'd love to hear from a dev or an official source as to how these two base traits are different, but as far as I could tell, I don't think they are. They both apply to any class. They both appear to do the same thing. The only main difference is that she is just 1% better at maximum rank. 6% versus his 5%. Now I think they do have a little bit of a missed opportunity here in that they could have done this to apply only to cruiser heals, and then that would have been a cool inspiration to consider for your only tier 7. Let's say you're a type of player that only plays tier 7 and Alaska, I guess. That could be an option there. It's oh, I want to make a tier 7 cruiser builder like a Tago and stuff like that, and all the premium 7s and tech tree 7s that all have heals, / the British cruiser line up and down the tree. That could have, again, been oh, it only applies to cruiser repair parties, and it's a little bit better. Let's say it does the same thing as Takagi's, but it only applies to cruisers, so it can top out at, maybe even 10%. Who knows? Would have been worthwhile. But, so a huge missed opportunity here for the devs to basically make a Takagi version of a base trait, but have it apply strictly to cruisers. Could make a fun little build meta when considering some cruiser builds. But again, I'd love to hear from a source that's definitive as to how this is different in any way in terms of mechanics. If you can explain it to me in the comments below, I'd love to hear about it. If you can cite a source, that'd be even better. Please do so. Otherwise, this is just pay to win power creep. That's what it looks like on its face. And as far as I'm concerned, going forward, unless I hear otherwise, that's strictly what her base trait is. As to her unique trait, it's called Ghost. It reduces the sea and air detectability of your cruiser. Yay, more testing. They're testing out how traits impact air detectability. Gee, I wonder why. This is in slot 2, and it doesn't have a whole lot of competition. I mean, really, torpedo detectability range and German cruiser HE shell fire chance, not that big of a deal. So in terms of what it's competing against, it's the obvious choice. Not a whole lot of opportunity cost with it. And again, considering it's in slot 2, tops out at 12 legendary 2. Relatively easy to get to that rank. So not too bad. You can max this out. German cruisers, not terribly well known for their stealth. They don't have smoke, etc. So they do want a little bit more stealth. Stack this with Mikawa, who you should be running on your cruisers anyway. Hey, you can get German cruisers to be pretty decently stealthy with this. Not too bad. Awesome. I'd say it's a pretty decent unique trait given its slot and its impact. As to her other suite of skills, she's just a von Mueller offensive build here. She's got access to fully packed. And if you consider von Mueller in slot 2 has a other trait, the expose trait, Ghost is way better than expose. So if you're into running von Mueller, then I would say she's a better option. With the caveat, and this kind of rolls us into the next category of using her, given that her base trait applies to the repair party, if you're using her on a ship that doesn't have repair party, you're wasting her base trait. So she's pretty solid on the Grefspee, the Hipper, and the Prinz Eugen as of right now. We may get German cruisers in the future that have heals as well, but for right now, those are the 3 ships that she would be useful on from a base trait perspective. Obviously, her unique trait, Ghost, useful on all of them. Probably more useful than anything you're going to pick on von Mueller in slot 2, but when you consider that von Mueller's base trait of cruiser speed is useful in all of the cruisers up and down the line, from tiers 1 to 7, premium included, you got to consider which boats you're using her on. So maybe you could, if you're into the offensive build for the Germans, you know, have von Mueller for anything that doesn't have a heal, have Grefspee for anything that does. That could be one way to go for your Navy. As to cross-class potential, again, since she's got fully packed, access to more consumables, every class loves having more consumables, but she really doesn't do a whole lot else for anyone. I mean, it's kind of like a poor man's will to rebuild / master mechanic with her base trait combined with fully packed, but again, just run like a rank 2 celiacs and you're pretty much, or rank 4 at least, I guess, then you're basically getting the same thing out of this. So I don't know, there isn't a whole lot of cross-class potential here. You know, this only applies to cruisers, so you're not getting anything out of that on other classes. So overall, probably not terribly useful to put her on the German DDs or the German battleships. So final thoughts on Azure Lane Grefspee. I don't think she's a super strong commander. I think that her base trait is okay. Not every ship in the game has the repair party consumable. Those that have it, it's a strictly better version of Takagi's as far as I can tell. Until I'm proven otherwise, that's what I'm going with. So if you do run Takagi as an inspiration on a build for the same rank of commander, she's just better. So consider that, you know, how you will. Her base trait here, or her unique trait rather, is great. German cruisers aren't terribly well known for their stealth, so helping that out is awesome. And the rest of her suite of skills is just von Mueller. So for those boats that can take advantage of her repair party, she's a decently solid option. Is she worth 5,000? I don't know. She's really only useful on 3 boats right now. Are you going to drop 5,000 gold for a commander that's useful on 3 boats and doesn't have that stellar of a base trait for use as an inspiration across the rest of the game? I don't know. That's a call you're going to have to make. Personally, I don't think I would do that. Alright, next we're going to take a look at Azure Lane Scharnhorst. Boy, look at those skills, kids. Wow. Her base trait, Sniper, improves your dispersion by 0.2% per rank, up to 4%. This applies to all ship types. probably one of the better base traits in the game. You know, we've talked about double concealment builds using Sversky for a while now. Personally, I think that has fallen out of the meta for a long time, but now we've got an opportunity to do double accuracy builds. You stack Azure Lane Scharnhorst with Burke, Scott, or Cunningham, depending on which class you're talking about here. Tighten up your dispersion, tighten up your precision. You've got that double accuracy build. I think there's going to be a lot of builds coming into the meta with this. Certain boats, certain lines are going to benefit from this tightening up of the dispersion quite a bit. None more so probably than the German battleships themselves, for which she is a commander. Taking a look at her unique skill here, torpedo launch in slot 2 increases your torpedo speed and range. Personally, I don't think this is terribly good. I mean, first of all, there's not that many boats that can take advantage of it. Scharnhorst, Gneisenau, Tirpitz, and Odin. 4 boats, as of right now, that can take advantage of this. Is it really worthwhile? Sure, if you're on one of those boats, slot it in. I guess it can't hurt you. Personally, I'd rather take Crisscross because in a brawling, pushing in situation where you're going to be using the torps, you're going to probably want main battery turret traverse more often than you're going to get some benefit out of a little bit of more torp speed and a little more range. I don't know what this tops out at, but you know, if it's 3% per rank, you max it out, that's going to be 12% range on a 6-kilometer torp is like a little over 600 meters. So they're going to go from 6-kilometer torps to 6.6. Is that really worth giving up main battery turret traverse? Probably not. Sure, they're a little faster, making them a little harder to dodge, but personally, I don't think this is worth taking over Crisscross. You got to see what it is when it's maxed out and really weigh the benefits, but I don't think it's going to be more worthwhile than Crisscross for those brawly, close in, you know, 7 kilometers or less type situations. As to the rest of her suite of skills, she's a standard Celiax Brawler build. You got the Brawler perk, Firefighter, Master Mechanic, Will to Rebuild, all that. And when you consider that she just has a strictly better base trait than him, again, pay to win, power creep, why run Celiax? Why level Celiax? His base trait isn't that useful for the Germans. It's not that useful as an inspiration. Again, she's just better in basically every way that matters. She has a unique trait that you might actually use from time to time. Maybe you want to do a running with scissors torpedo build on a, you know, Scharnhorst or Gneisenau type torp boat, and then if you're playing like Bismarck or Bayern or something, you swap her to Crisscross, Will to Rebuild. You know, she's got a little more versatility in that way, because the German battleships kind of have 2 different flavors, and she can kind of be flipped around to, you know, accommodate both of those flavors, if you will. So in terms of usefulness on the German battleships, she's probably one of the more versatile. I think that given her base trait, she might be better than Hyde, because she's got access to all the skills you'd be using on Hyde except gyrating gyro bits, and she has Will to Rebuild. And she arguably has a more useful base trait than Hyde for the German battleships. So is Hyde completely irrelevant now? I'd say probably, or at least possibly. Hard to say for sure, but I think Scharnhorst is in most situations better than Hyde at this point. As to cross-class potential, I think she's actually got, of these 5 ladies, some of the best cross-class potential. Her base trait would be useful on the cruisers. Basically, the cruisers with a heel. Your Grafspee, Eugen, and Hipper for the Germans. Potentially some functionality here. Slot 1 is a little weak, you know, obviously because you're getting very little out of Brawler, and these other 2 options are not very good. But, you know, you're getting something out of potentially Torpedo Launch or Crisscross. Again, Porcupine, what a skill, huh? Firefighter is fairly useful. Master Mechanic plus Will to Rebuild, not bad, you know. Again, there are stronger choices, but she wouldn't be wasting any slot or her base trait on the German cruisers that have a heel. So for final thoughts on Azure Lane Scharnhorst, I think she's a very solid option given her base trait especially. using that as inspiration, I think we're going to see, as I mentioned, quite a few kind of double accuracy builds coming into the meta with Azure Lane Scharnhorst. It's a very powerful thing to tighten up that dispersion, even if it is by kind of mid 3 up to 4% at totally maxed out level. That's still a very solid addition to every single salvo. You're going to land more and more shells. More and more shells on target means a dead enemy faster, means you're still alive and your team's going to win more often. She's decent on the German battleships. Stronger than Celiax in every way that matters. Arguably at least as good, if not better, than Hyde. So take that for all what you will. Is she worth 5,000 gold to you? Personally, I think she's near the top of my list for maybe trying to pick up during this event. And lastly, we're going to talk about Azure Lane Fuso. Oh, hide the weebs on this one. Cat ears, are you kidding me? Anyway, her base trait, cover fire, increases the chance of your battleship's HE shells starting a fire. Goes up 0.15% per rank for a maximum of 3%. 3% fire chance on battleship HE shells only. No, this is a pretty trash base trait. It's really not worth a whole lot. You should be shooting AP like 99% of the time in a battleship. And when you do flip to HE, it's probably because it's near the end of the game and the only thing left on the enemy team you know is a DD. So flip to HE. With the couple exceptions of like maybe some of the British battleships, a little more than 99% of the time you can flip, to HE. But for those ships, the reason you're flipping to HE is because they actually have a pretty high fire chance, pushing the 50% range. An extra 2-ish to 3-ish%. Who cares? You're already in the 45% range. It's not a couple extra percent. Wasting an inspiration slot on that is not going to make or break the difference of whether or not you start fire. The Japanese battleships shouldn't really be flipping to HE hardly ever. They pretty much up and down the line have big guns for the tier. Their AP can hit pretty hard. It does a lot of damage per shell. It can rip through armor pretty well. Why would you flip to HE in a Japanese battleship? It just doesn't make any sense. Her base trait for the Japanese and as an inspiration, pretty much not worth your time. As to her unique trait, Battle Spirit, this is a very interesting unique trait. Unfortunately, it's in slot 3. It does increase your maximum hit points and reduces the incoming damage. And remember, boys and girls, incoming damage is only from shells and torpedoes. Fire ticks and flood ticks do not count as incoming damage, so you will take normal full damage from those unless you have something else impacting that. But any shell that hits you, any torpedo that hits you, the damage from that will be reduced, as well as the fact that your maximum hit point pool is increased. So you're functionally here at, mastery level 1 getting like a 4% boost. 2% plus the 2%. So it's not too bad. Yes, fire and flood still does their normal damage, but all other types of damage plus the boost to HP, you're functionally getting about a 4% boost here, even at mastery level 1. So not too bad. The unfortunate thing, and this kind of rolls into her skill suite, is that it's in slot 3. So 1, it doesn't max out till 14 legendary 3, which is a big ask for these Azure Lane commanders. And it's competing with marksmanship. The Japanese battleships tend to struggle with accuracy. The reason to take a Takagi accuracy build, which most people play with on the Japanese ships, is because they struggle with accuracy. You're giving up one of your accuracy skills for a survivability perk. Why is this not on a Kondo build? Why didn't we get this on a Kondo build in, say, slot 2, where it's competing against Porcupine and Crisscross? So if you're approaching the Japanese battleships as like, I want to build them more tanky, more pushy, brawly survivability build, this would be a great option in slot 2 on a brawler Kondo style build. And then give us a base trait that's like Lemonnier and Voilette, where it reduces the bloom time of battleship guns. So you could justify that kind of push in, shoot, and then drop spot or something like that. I just don't understand. This is kind of a contradictory skill where it's at on the build that it's with. It just doesn't make any sense. It's kind of clashing, if you will, with the rest. I mean, look at all the rest of this red. It's almost all confrontation. And then we get her unique trait as a survivability. It seems like a wasted opportunity and some bad game design. As a skill, it's a very solid skill. It just clashes with the philosophy of the rest of the build and just doesn't really work with it. It's, you know, kind of a square peg in a round hole situation. So it's really unfortunate that this skill, though a good idea, is largely wasted on this commander with the rest of her set of skills and the slot that it's in. So we've briefly mentioned what I think of her in terms of her build suite and her on the boats, but just to more specifically hit on that stuff, she's just a Takagi build with an undesirable slot 3 option, because you do want to run marksmanship for the Japanese battleships, and a base trait that is arguably less good, because Takagi's base trait, you're going to use a heal pretty much every game. Whereas whole games go by in a battleship where you shouldn't be flipping to HE. So rather than get some use out of a base trait multiple times, pretty much guaranteed every single game when you hit your heal, you run the risk of not needing to use her base trait once in an entire game. Personally, I just think she's a subpar Takagi with a unique trait you're probably never going to select, and a base trait that you might never have come into play. As to cross-class potential, just don't. She's not going to be useful on the Japanese cruisers, or especially not the Japanese DDs. Oh my gosh, please don't. So, cross-class potential, she's probably the weakest of all 5 of these new Azure Lane Round 2 commanders. So final thoughts on Fusou. I'm really not convinced on this commander. A bit of a wasted opportunity. If she would have been a Kondo brawler build with that unique trait, maybe it'd be a little more viable, but for 5,000 gold to guarantee buy her, or, you know, if you want to gamble on the crates to maybe unlock her, I personally don't think it's worth it unless you're really into the cat ears stuff, but no thanks. Alright, let's talk about the rest of the things on offer in the special tab here. This is $150 US. You can buy the 47,000 doubloon package bundle for $149.99 US. So basically this is $150. Oh, you get a premium version of 3 tech tree ships. Woo! That gets you a little bit more XP and a little bit reduced service cost. Oh, it comes with a premium skin. Yeah, you can make those for free with consumable camos. Whoop-de-doo. Ooh, it comes with Azure Lane themed skins for 2 premium boats, Grafspee and Scharnhorst. Well, first of all, you have to have those ships to even use them. And second of all, it's not like they do anything else for you that these ships' skins don't already do. These ships already come with skins that give you 4.5% detectability and fire dispersion. Why? They don't even look that good. Ooh, some flags. Whoop-de-doo. Who cares about flags? And then you get 7 commander crates. There are only 5 gals, and the game re-rolls you a commander until you have your entire roster full. So you're guaranteed to get all 5 of them if you buy this bundle. And then you will get 2 after you have your entire roster filled. Once you start getting repeats, it does not re-roll. So you could, hypothetically, pull 2 golds for the same commander. Pretty unlikely, but it is possible once you fill up that last roster, or that last roster slot, and open those last 2 crates. So you are guaranteed to get golds on at least one of them. If you do, it's 2. Otherwise, you're guaranteed to get gold on 2 different commanders to make them Legend 1. Is this bundle, you're largely paying for tech tree ships. Like, literally, most of the cost of this bundle is tech tree ships. And 2 of them are tier 5. You can get to tier 5 in like a week playing this game. Not even terribly aggressively. Like, fairly casually, you can get to a Fuso or a Queen Elizabeth with a pretty casual regimen of play. Sure, getting all the way to Baltimore takes a little more time. But you know what? It's not that big of a deal. Who cares about these skins on a premium version of the ship? Premium version of the ship. Ridiculous. Sure, it's another copy of a ship for if and when they do once per update rewards. So I guess from that perspective, but you know, when you're talking at the tier 5, those are rarely all that great once you're talking tier 5 once per update rewards. They're usually like daily crates or like consumable camos or flags. They're really not usually that good once you get down to tier 5. So for some skins that aren't really going to get you anything that you can't already get for free, some flags, it's really not worth the cost of this bundle in my opinion. This reeks of desperation. It just... They know that they're going to torpedo a huge chunk of the player base, if you pardon the pun, when they introduce the carriers here relatively soon. And they're just trying to milk people for as much money as they can get out of them right now before they do that. So that's all that this is to me. Do not buy this bundle. It is a giant waste of your money. Please don't. Similarly, out here we got tech tree ships for sale for $30 each for tier 5. Like, what is this? It's a tech tree ship with a skin on it. You can make a premium skin for free with consumable camos. Do not spend your money on this. Do not signal to Wargaming that this is a good business practice for them to continue. You should be getting value out of your money when you contribute it. $30 is like a nice Steam game, like an independent Steam game from an independent creator, or like half of a quote-unquote AAA title for a 4.5% skin on a tech tree ship that you can get for free. This is ridiculous. Do not signal to Wargaming that this is something that they should continue doing, and this is not the value of doubloons in this game. The value of doubloons should be much higher than this. Similarly, 5,000 doubloons for a skin that does 4.5% on a boat that already has that. Your Graf Spee already came with a premium skin. Your Scharnhorst already came with a premium skin. To be fair, you may not have spent money to get these ships, but you probably did. Most people that have Graf Spee and or Scharnhorst probably spent money in some capacity to get them, be it buying big crates, buying them straight out of the store, buying Black Friday crates, which leads me to a great point about this Scharnhorst skin. This Scharnhorst skin only works on the regular Scharnhorst. If you have a Scharnhorst Black, this Azure Lane skin will not work on it. So please do not buy this Scharnhorst Azure Lane skin if you only have a Scharnhorst Black, because it will not work. They do not tell you this anywhere on here from what I can see. It says for your Scharnhorst. Yeah, it says for your Scharnhorst on here, but a lot of people are not gonna, it's not gonna cross their mind of like, oh, well, I have Scharnhorst Black, that's a Scharnhorst, it's literally the same ship, except it's got a B in it and another unique camo. Nope, it's not gonna work, so please do not buy this Scharnhorst skin thinking that it'll work on your Scharnhorst Black. You have to have the regular, quote-unquote, Scharnhorst for this to work. As to the crate bundles here, you can buy one of them for $2,500, so it's half the cost of a commander. So you basically get to gamble for a 50% discount, but is that really worth it? You can buy all 5 of them for $1,250. So that again is half. So you can guarantee get all of them for half. But let's say you're in a position where you only want to buy 2 of them, like Scharnhorst and Queen Elizabeth. Hint, hint, stomp, stomp, the only 2 worth buying. What? Who said that? Well, that's only 10,000 gold. So functionally here, you're wasting 2,500 gold to get all 5 of them. And sure, metas can change and whatever, ships can change. They can do things to the meta by changing how mechanics work or whatever. Sure, they might do something in the future that would make having Azure Lane Baltimore worth it, or Azure Lane Fusou worth it, but chances are pretty low of that. And then if you're in a, you know, sort of doubloons are a, you know, hot commodity. Look at my doubloon count, for example. If you're in a position where doubloons are kind of low right now, then getting all of them is probably not worthwhile. Sure, spending an extra $8 or whatever to just have all of them one copy of all of them might be worthwhile to you. Because as I mentioned, when you buy these crate packs, the game will re-roll until you have the entire roster. It stops re-rolling them once you complete the roster of 5. So keep that in mind. If you say are going to buy this 10 pack, you could fill up your roster and then pull 5 copies of the same gal after that. It will not re-roll until you have Legendary 1 for all of them, for example. You're not guaranteed to get all 5 of them once and then get all 5 of them one copy to get all of them Legend 1 if you buy this 10 pack. So keep that in mind. If you're interested in having all of them, obviously this 5 pack is the best value. If you look at all 5 of them and say, oh yeah, sure, I would use all of them. Oh, I could see myself leveling them all up and using them on their ships or whatever, or using them as inspirations. If you're in that camp, then don't buy them individually. Buy the 5 pack, sure. If you're only interested in 1 or 2 of them, then it's cheaper to just buy them individually. If you're interested in 3 or more of them, then buying this 5 pack is technically cheaper because of the reroll mechanic. Thankfully, they've got that reroll mechanic in there. Alright, now we're going to go into the campaign and missions tab. Echo, why are we going into the campaign and missions tab? We're talking about the Azure Lane crossover event. Oh, wait, there's no mission for free Azure Lane 2 crates? Huh, that's weird. Let's think back to last time there was an Azure Lane collaboration with the original 6 gals. Huh, I remember that I could play the game, not give any of my money to Wargaming, and get 4 crates for free. And they had the reroll mechanic, so that means I could guaranteed get 4 of the original first round collaboration gals just by playing the game for free. Wow! And then if I wanted the other 2 to fill out the roster, you know, then I could buy the crates after that. Wow, that's crazy. But that's not in here this time? It's almost like it reeks of desperation, and that they're trying to milk us for as much money as they can get out of us because they know that the player base is going to take a huge hit in a couple of months when they introduce aircraft carriers. So they're trying to squeeze as much money out of people as they can right now. Wow, this is just shocking to me. Okay, in all seriousness though, commanders, like, that's really skeezy. Again, like, please, you know, light up Discord, light up Reddit, light up the YouTube comment sections, light up the Facebook pages. Why did we have the ability to, for free, get 4 commander crates the last time the collaboration rolled around, and now, at least as far as I can tell, there is no way to get even a single one for free? And then if you remember, during the birthday celebration, they also had another 1 Azure Lane Commander crate for free. So I have all 6 original Azure Lane Commanders, and all I did was buy 1 random crate to fill out my roster. This time, in order to fill out your roster, you've got to spend at least 12,500 doubloons to get the entire roster filled out. Now, to be fair to Wargaming, I know I just, you know, read them a riot, or whatever that phrase is. To be fair, this is a negotiation with another company. That other company, who licensed the Azure Lane intellectual property, could have had something to do with why we don't get any free ones. I will try to be fair to Wargaming in that regard. It might not be entirely on them. But they were able to do it once before. That collaboration was very successful. Why aren't they doing it again this time? You know, you could get 4 out of 6 last time. Let's do 2 or 3 out of 5 this time. You know, play the game, get 2 or 3 of the crates for free. And then if you want to fill out your roster, you can buy the single crates or buy the 5 pack to get a couple duplicates or whatever. I'm just flabbergasted as to why under this campaign and missions tab, there's not a way to get any of the Azure Lane Round 2 commander crates for free. And lastly, I want to just talk about these commanders as a whole, not any one in particular. But we started to see this with the Warhammer 40k. And then it became abundantly apparent during the Transformers. And then it was really made clear during this last Halloween. And it's totally solidified by this Azure Lane collaboration. I don't know what the deal is, but if you think back to the first Azure Lane collaboration and the first Halloween, the first two times we got sort of non-historic commanders, those commanders were trade-offs, right? Like the legendary slots didn't have like the good one, right? Your cruiser commanders didn't have fully packed. Your battleship commanders didn't have will to rebuild, etc. It was kind of a hybrid in terms of the rest of the tech tree. You get a little bit of the brawler build, you get a little bit of the accuracy build, etc. in the battleship commanders, whatever have you. So why did they get away from this? It started with Warhammer 40k, but those guys aren't that great. But then with Transformers, you know, Megatron was just strictly better Ciliax. Bumblebee was just strictly better Halsey, etc. And now it's just pay-to-win power creep. Scharnhorst, we talked about it. Queen Elizabeth, we talked about it. Graf Spee, for the cruisers that have a heel, we talked about how she's just basically better than Von Mueller, at least on those boats that have a heel. It's just, and in terms of comparing to Takagi's base trait as well, for inspiration purposes. Again, this is just like pay-to-win power creep. They got away from the sort of hybrid trade-off min-max. All of these gals have base traits that only help you. All of their unique traits only help you. The original Azure Lane, the original Halloween, there were trade-offs. There were bigger bonuses, but also bigger penalties. You know, Azure Lane Nelson, for example, with Big 7 skill. Huge penalty to shell penetration in exchange for shell damage. It's kind of that min-max philosophy. And you have to give up will to rebuild. You don't have to give anything up on these commanders. They're just strictly better versions in most cases. You know, Scharnhorst, for example, just is a better Ciliax for 5,000 gold. It's like, do you like Ciliax? Yeah, I like Ciliax on my German battleships. Okay, here's a better one for 5,000 gold. It's not a trade-off. It's not a min-max. It's just a better version. And it's very sad to see. I hope that going forward with any other non-historic commanders, that they either go back to that kind of min-max trade-off philosophy of the first Azure Lane and the first Halloween, or they come back in and alter those first Azure Lane and those first Halloween commanders and make them good like these ones. Because it's ridiculous that like Hyde and Azure Lane Nelson, for example, do not have will to rebuild, but Scharnhorst does. Queen Elizabeth does. So that's my 2 cents on this collaboration overall as a whole. It just reeks of desperation. They know that the player base is going to take a huge hit in the next couple of months when they introduce carriers, so they're trying to milk us for as much as they can get out of us now by introducing pay-to-win, strictly better versions of their quote-unquote historical real-world commander equivalents. Thanks for watching, everybody. I hope this has been a triumphant return. I know it's been a bit of a long one, but hey, I haven't been around for a month, so you get a little longer dose of echo. So thanks an awful lot for listening. I greatly appreciate it. I greatly appreciate everybody's support on the channel, and we're going to be getting back into more regular videos here now. And as always, stay salty, Commanders.